Hi, welcome to McBean's. We're now in June. I have no idea what day in June, but it's the first week or so. So Chelsea is done and dusted, albeit quite virtually. I don't know if any of you saw it. We did a little bit for the BBC when we were highlighting this, which is Cymbidium lowianum magnificum McBean's. This is a plant that's about 120 years old now and it's been to every Chelsea. So obviously it didn't make it to this year's Chelsea, but maybe next year we'll do that. So what we're left with on the nursery really is just this sort of group of plants here. These are the plants that we would have sold as a follow-up order from Chelsea, basically. So they're sort of a whole range of different things that grow in different temperatures. But let me just introduce you a few of them. We've got a couple of the slipper orchids here. This is the slipper orchid Paphiopedilum. This is Pinocchio, okay, which is a lovely hybrid. Nice one about this is you get follow-on flowers. You can see you've got another two or three buds to come on there. So that'll last ages. And then we got this little fella, which is bred from Maudie. This is called Femma. As you can see, lovely green and white stripes. Absolutely gorgeous things, this. One of my favourites of all the Paphs. Paphs, slipper orchids. So we have our own indigenous slipper orchid in this country, actually. It just really refers to the pouch there. It looks like a slipper. They are lithophytes. They grow in and around rocks. So you've got to be very, very careful with your watering on these. They don't make much root. Literally just one or two roots that then divide within the pot. They're usually grown in pure bark or bark with sort of chunks of usually calcium limestone or something like that in the mix itself. And really you should never use anything but rainwater and a bit of orchid feed. They're very, very fussy with their feed. They last for months. They can easily last 2 months. But they need plenty of shade and a fairly high humidity. Okay, so they're quite happy in your living room conditions, but maybe grow those on a little gravel tray that you keep moist, just to up that humidity. They grow under other things, so they don't need a lot of light. It's almost like our version of growing a hosta, if that makes sense. So fairly cool, fairly shaded, plenty of good clean water. Right, so that's that little group. Let's move on to these. Now these are the true Oncidiums. These are known as dancing ladies. This is Oncidium Munsterland. As you can see, it makes loads and loads of flowers, goes on for ages. And unlike the Paphs we were just looking at, these are sympodial, they grow outwards. So you can see it makes that a new growth. So the new growth will make a bulb, and then this time next year it'll be flowering from that bulb. So these will take as much heat as you give them. They will actually take more light than the slipper orchids there. Again, not full summer sunlight, but plenty of good light. Again, must have this high humidity. All these plants that grow in these warm countries still usually come from areas that it rains first thing in the morning, so there's all that background humidity, or they're growing over water or something like that. So although it's a warm country, it's a very, very high humidity. And these are quite happy that they really are a good grower. So they won't probably last quite as long as the slipper orchids there, but you can easily get a month out of these, no problem at all. You've got a variation of these now. There's a whole group of plants that you'll see in garden centres often called Cambrias, where they've got a bit of Oncidium and a few other things in them. So you'll get this sort of little fella. And when it's a sort of, usually what the word Cambria implies it's got some of the cooler growing Oncidiums. So it's the same family as these, but they are a bit higher up in the mountains, up into the sort of cloud forest, a little bit cooler. So if you see the word Cambria, then it usually means it needs somewhere cooler, darker and a heavier shade, more so than your living room is going to be. It's going to be too hot and dry. Somewhere like, if you like, the downstairs loo is good in summer. Background humidity is high, nice well-shaded position. Again, never ever use tap water on these. They really can't cope with it. So that's Cambrias, which you'll see in different forms, different guises, but usually they've got this slightly cooler growing. There's another one there, it's got a slightly cooler growing plant in. Okay. Now just keeping with these, which are epiphytes, yeah, these upper trees, remember the Paphs, grow in the ground, lithophytes. We've got another one here. This is a lovely little thing, Chenine, again, which is that slightly cooler growing, again, often sold as Cambria, but it just means it's got some of that cooler growing in, so that goes with that grouping there. Now we move on to more of the weirdo things. These are the Brassia. This is Shelob, famous Brassia. These grow right through Venezuela. In fact, I think it's the national flower of Venezuela, one of the Verrucosa, one of the species of these things. As you can see, they put up loads and loads of foliage, and they like to be tight in the pot. You'll notice a lot of our plants look under-potted. That will stay in there for at least another year, to the point the bulbs are actually extending past the edge of the pot. They're much happier that way. Again, high humidity, plenty of water, and they'll flower for a couple of months, no problem at all. There's a variation here. It's crossing from the Brassia. Gives you that lovely spottle there. It's actually got a bit of Miltonia, one of the pansy orchids on it. And last but not least, we've got the good old Phalaenopsis. These are obviously the #1 pot plant in the world by far now. There are more Phalaenopsis grown than any other single pot plant. These, however, are the latest named varieties. There's new varieties brought out every few years, obviously, and these were brought out specially. These lovely sort of compact plants. This is Demonica.
Yeah.
And you can see it's making these long aerial roots here. Now, these are the roots that the plant would normally attach itself to the tree. So they look for light. They actually follow the light around the trunk of the host tree, so it cuddles itself to a tree. So that's the point of these transparent pots, is to try and retain these roots within the pot. It obviously works to a certain extent. I like them. Some people cut them off, but they are there to help the plant grow. They're actually much more like a leaf than a root. They do breathe in and out, just like a sort of a leaf does, to be perfectly honest. You can see they can make a sort of slightly silvery sheen to them. That's not actually the root. The root is inside there. If I just cut that, you'll see the root is actually that tiny little thin, that's not a very good example there. That thin bit is the actual root. So all this stuff around there is just to hold a bit of moisture around the root. People worry about these tremendously. They don't make bulbs like the others. They're what they call monopodal, i.e. they just grow upwards. So they don't grow outwards at all. And all you've got to do is just keep them slightly moist, again with preferably rainwater with a bit of orchid feed. You can see if there's anything wrong. You'll get lots of dead brownie roots. There's just 1 or 2 occurring here. It's worth repotting them about every 3rd year, because often the bark, which they're growing in, is decomposed, so it won't hold any moisture, hold any structure. But a lot of people find that you get an algal growth in there, plus they're top heavy. So the easiest way to solve both of those problems is just to stand this within a ceramic pot. As long as it's got good drainage, it doesn't matter really what pot it's in at all. Okay, if you don't mind these aerial roots, that is. So water sparingly from the top, let it run out the bottom. Maybe you'll do this on the draining board, and then stand it back in its pot. It must never ever sit wet. Okay, this would be 20 foot up a tree. In fact, more importantly, it would be up a tree at that aspect. They grow on a slightly horizontal plane. And if you look, all the water, the guttering rather, is designed to get the water away from the centre of the plant. Now, we grow them the most ridiculous. We grow them up the wrong way, in effect. And now those leaves collect water, and that's the last thing we want this plant to do. So we water from the top, let it drain out, but don't let any water sit in this apex. It can rot the plant overnight. Now, these will repeat flower. There's very few orchids will do that. And these, what we do, we count 3 nodes up from the base. The nodes are these little lumps. There's one right down there, there's 1. There's another one, there's 2. And that one there's the third one. So when this is finished flowering, which could be another 3 months or so, you cut just above the 3rd node, and then if your conditions are good enough, i.e. humidity's right, your watering's right, your feeding's right, it will branch from there and put up another complete flower spike, usually within about 3 or 4 months. But it's down to you. It depends on how well you are growing it. If the plant doesn't think it can support the flower spike, then it won't. Sometimes if you get a big flower spike and they drop buds, the furthest buds from the top drop, it's indicative that the background humidity is not high enough. Because these plants lose a lot of moisture from this big flower area, they can have more flower than plant in effect. They won't endanger themselves by flowering. So in a dry atmosphere, it knows if it had all these flowers, it would actually endanger the plant. It would abort the buds from the furthest end. So it doesn't mean to say the plant needs to be any wetter. It just means the conditions it's growing in needs to be a higher humidity. Again, just a small gravel tray, 1 inch of gravel, keep that wet. Don't let the plant soak any water up from the gravel, but you want that microclimate around our plants. We technically live in a desert. It's usually 20 degrees, but only 10% humidity. That's a desert. And a lot of plants, well, most plants will struggle in a desert situation. So I say these are the new Phalaenopsis that have just come out really. There's a beautiful one at the back there, called, I can't remember what it's called, what's the name of that one?
Cassie.
Cassie, there we go. So these are the latest production line ones. So these would be the plants that we would be selling normally, orders post-Chelsea Flower Show. Now obviously that's not happened, so we've got these ones lying around. So this will be our last crop in effect right through the season until we start with the new Cymbidiums coming up again in about November. So that's really what the state of the nursery is at the moment and what we've got. And so these are all on our website if you want to have a look at them. And always give Ellie a ring or whatever to answer any questions. Anyway, thank you very much, and we'll see you again in the autumn time.
Brilliant.